This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. We are here to talk about SMU spring ball and what it meant for the defense, led by Scott Symons, defensive coordinator, coming back for another season on the hilltop, along with multiple staffers returning, which is big news for SMU. That defensive staff obviously did a lot of good things in that run to the AAC championship last year. But first, we got to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet, statusjet.com. Head over there today to get the latest on how they can help you get from point A to point B with that level of luxury that you would expect from a private jet charter experience. Look, summer is coming up, and you're going to want to be, if you're me, in a tropical destination. Now, we're going to go down to Florida, see some family, do the beach, do things like that. But StatusJet can hook you up with a way to get to some of those tough to get to destinations. If you want to go with family, if you want to go with friends, reminder, you've got that Pony Up ACC code to get a discount on a round trip. But Bora Bora, the Maldives, these are some of those elite island destinations that you can go to. St. Bart's, Bali. Talk to StatusJet. It's a long flight. You want to do it right. You want to do it big. Talk to StatusJet. See what they can do for you. Again, code PonyUpACC to get a discount on a round trip flight, or mention on theponyexpress.com. Head to StatusJet today. David Henry and his entire team can assist you. You can give them a call at 866-404-9791. They will help you out and get you on the track to flying with an elite level of luxury that you'd expect when you book with our friends at StatusJet. SMU's defense, a lot of the same in spring ball, a lot of dominance is what I saw out of Scott Symons' group. Some questions for this group as they begin to prepare for fall camp. The transfer portal window is open. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about recruiting on that front on Friday's podcast, but the Mustangs have a lot of talent returning, and in particular, you've got a strong group of defensive ends. You've got a strong group with Elijah Roberts leading the way on that defensive line front that is going to lead you probably to another strong season of defense on the hilltop, which is still somewhat weird to say, but it's the new reality for SMU after last season's group finished among the nation's best defenses. And with Elijah Roberts leading the way, who, by the way, just looks like a Greek god. Elijah Roberts is going to be a draft pick for SMU. And I feel like if he has a season that he could have in the ACC, he could be bound for a day one, maybe, but day two draft pick pretty safely. I mean, he's got an elite blend of size and bend that really looks, when he's out there, like kind of a Greek god. I mean, he's just able to do whatever he wants for the most part. So they have some things that they want to work on with him, but coming off of spring, he just looked the part and really was taking a leadership role as well. So there's a lot of excitement around Elijah Roberts, and for good reason, as he leads that entire defensive line unit. He's become that leader that you want. On top of being the best player on that defensive line, he's really going to have a chance to shine this season on a bigger stage against better competition week in, week out. We saw what he could do and change the game for SMU in the AAC. Now we'll see what he can do in the ACC in spring. He had class on Tuesdays, I believe. That kind of cut his practices short a little bit, but that just kept him a little bit fresher for when he was out there to get some serious work in. And they were careful with him, but Elijah Roberts really looked the part this spring, as you would expect for one of the best players on this entire football team, if not the best. I mean, in reality, SMU is going to have a defensive line that I think can control the line of scrimmage once again. And I think the way they built it with a guy like Tank Booker, big 350-pounder in the middle, and who really, I felt like, flashed some athleticism throughout spring that I wasn't really expecting You have him and you have Mike Lockhart, the West Virginia transfer, on top of guys like Corey Roberson coming back. You've got Jafari Harvey on the edge, opposite of Elijah Roberts. They really added a nice piece in Jonathan Jefferson, who has 2 years. He made some plays in the spring game from what our reports were out there from Kevin and Jordan and all the people we talked to. They really do have a defensive line that I feel like if it stays healthy and they can add one more piece, and they've got Blake Burris coming in, but if they can add one more defensive tackle, they'll have a good shot to be a strong defense because that group just helps out everybody so much in terms of making sure that they can control the line of scrimmage, make it difficult on the opposing defenses, or the opposing offenses to accomplish just about anything. Now, when you look at the transfers that they brought in, you look at Tank Booker, you see him standing there in the background if you're watching on YouTube as Elijah Roberts takes a rep. Number 10 is really somebody who I feel like has bought in well to what Calvin Thibodeau wants from him. And he is a big, strong man in the middle. And when you have somebody, as we saw with Jordan Miller last year, who can hold that point of attack, it's really important because there are so many defensive tackles these days that want to be pass rushers and want to be, these uber athletic guys. But in reality, defenses need somebody to contain that offensive line from being able to work up to the second level. And when you have somebody that big in the middle, it is game changing. And then you factor in Elijah Roberts and his athleticism. It's just a group that I think the pieces they've put together just really have a chance to be special. And Omari Abor actually flashed a little bit in the spring game as well from the video I saw, which was encouraging. And he's kind of working behind Elijah Roberts. And they have veterans returning in Corey Roberson and Mike Yohan, Sanjo, and G-Key. So they have options. And I just feel like it's potentially, especially when you factor in Elijah Roberts being that much better, I think this year potentially, or at least this time last year, Elijah Roberts we were talking about him as okay, where does he play? Does he end up being a bandit? Does he end up being a defensive end? And he came back from the summer and just looked, like a true defensive end. You have that settled. This year you have, I think, so many more bigger bodies that can really control the line of scrimmage versus last year you had Elijah Chapman, who's excellent, Jordan Miller, who was very good, and then you had Devere Levelston, who they were still hoping could kind of come on. Now you have Tank, you have Mike Lockhart, you have Jonathan Jefferson, you have Corey Roberson. Now you have all these different faces on that defensive line. I just feel like they're that good. And I know we're spending the first however many minutes of the podcast just talking up SMU's defensive line, but it's well-deserved. They're phenomenal at all four spots. They really are. And if they can get through the transfer portal window and keep, obviously, Jafari Harvey just got here, so they'll keep him. But Isaiah Smith, Cam Robertson, Jalen Samuels, all those guys, this is a defensive edge end position that across the board is really going to be phenomenal. And the interior guys have the chance to be excellent in their own right. And they all have different body types that can help. It's just, last year was fun for the defensive line. There's no question about it. This year has a chance to be just as fun because, yes, they are jumping up into the ACC. So the level is going to improve from a standpoint of it's going to be potentially more difficult for them. And it is going to be more difficult. But they've also added talent. They've developed the talent on the field that they had already. And you've got to give Calvin Thibodeau a lot of credit for doing that and doing that at a high level. So if there's one position group on this defense that you should be sitting there saying, wow, okay, they're stepping up in the ACC. How's it going to go? Should I be concerned? Yes, you should be always, I guess, wondering what's going to happen in terms of can they piece it together with this upcoming ACC schedule. But if there's one position group that I am not worried about in terms of how they're going to perform if they all stay healthy, it's Calvin Thibodeau's defensive line group. Then you move back to the next two levels of the defense. And the linebacking group returns everybody except Chris Adamora, who was kind of a backup situational player for them at the linebacker position. And then they added Justin Medlock into the fold. Alex Kilgore is a year older. Brandon Maiazono is a year older. You added Zach Smith, a freshman linebacker, and then you bring in Brandon Booker this summer. This is another position group that just by returning Ahmad Walker, Kobe Wilson, players like that, you're probably better because they're back again in Jaquandis Burns. You're back again in another year of Scott Symons' system. Maurice Crum is back. Your linebackers coach is not changing. And we saw the development that he brought to the table when it came to Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker and Alex Kilgore, getting them ready to play and all of those things. I think once again, you enter the ACC with a question of, okay, how can they perform week in, week out against better competition? Because this is a group that isn't all of these guys, quite honestly, outside of maybe Kilgore, are playing everybody except the freshmen, and in particular Brandon Booker in that sense. Everybody is playing at the group of five level from last year because they're maybe a little undersized. They're not these 6'3", 230-pound unicorns that can really run. Ahmad Walker's 5'11". Kobe Wilson's probably 6 foot. They're good linebackers who can read and diagnose and make plays. I think the question is, how much of a step up does Alex Kilgore take this year? Because he's pushing for playing time. You've got Ahmad Walker and Kobe Wilson there. Do they end up just playing both of those guys a lot at the same spot? Maybe the will, and you play Kilgore and Brandon Maiazono, and maybe Brandon Booker emerges as a true freshman because of his size. How does that all work out? Like, who is the Elijah Roberts of this group this year for the linebackers? Like, they need somebody to emerge as a star at the linebacker position, I think, just because you're going to have so much talent up front in front of you on the defensive line. You need these linebackers to really just elevate once again. And it's funny, I talked with Kobe Wilson at an event in December when we had the transfer portal kickoff with our friends at Pony Sports DTX. And he brought up that everybody was kind of questioning the linebackers, and it was a question mark. I mean, the only kind of sure thing going into last year was that Ahmad Walker had played for Scott Symons, and he had been really, really good for 2 years, in Scott Symons' defense in a way, and they were betting on him to be the starting linebacker. We thought Kobe Wilson was a multi-year AAC contributor who could be good. We thought Alex Kilgore had a ton of talent. Jaquandis Burns, could he do something? Chris Adamora, what was he going to do? And so it was a group that had a lot of questions. Now they have a lot of returning players, but as you step up into the ACC and playing a Power 5 schedule, how does this group elevate their game again? Because that's what they need to do. And trust me, every position group on this team needs to elevate their game as they move into the Power 5 ranks. But you have certain position groups that you sit there and say, okay, those guys are built to or built from the Power 5 ranks. The defensive line is clearly built from the Power 5 ranks in a way. You have the linebacker group that Ahmad Walker played at Liberty. Kobe Wilson played at Temple and came in and impressed. Alex Kilgore is pretty much, outside of Jaquandis Burns, who went to Minnesota for a cup of coffee, Jaquandis Burns is the only one that is really, Alex Kilgore is the only one that was really recruited, at a high level. And I guess Justin Medlock too, he played at Utah. But Alex Kilgore was recruited at a high level and really highly thought of coming out of high school. I mean, he was borderline, almost a 4-star. We just couldn't get him across the finish line to be one. But he is somebody that is kind of the mold of what you want SMU to be recruiting for the Power 5 ranks now. All of these guys are undersized. They're slept on, and I get it. And they performed last year, and they were a big reason why the defense was able to be the way it was. but it's just another big step up. So, and it's again a hard unit to say, okay, you have this linebacking group that, in the spring you don't get too much work tackling, running back. So how are their run fits with the new defensive line? Now, I just feel like this defense dominated the offense throughout spring. So it's okay for me to sit here and feel pretty good about this defense once again. They return a lot of talent. But how, again, does it translate to the ACC? And the linebacking group is kind of one of my question marks in terms of I'm just going to have to see it again. And maybe sleeping on them works out and they end up being a really, really strong group once again. But the biggest question on this defense, and we're going to go into it and we're covering it throughout the transfer portal and who they're going to get and trying to figure that out, is the cornerback room. Ricky Hundley's got his work cut out for himself after having Charles Woods and Chris Megginson as your starters, who you could pretty much just throw out there and be okay with and know that they're going to be able to handle it. Now you have a group that loses two starters. They've got talent in terms of guys that can certainly help and run support and do those things, but covering man-to-man is just something that I feel like all the players at the cornerback position, we just really have to see it, and we have to see them emerge as consistent contributors in that sense, because it's a position group with true question marks right now. And so when you have the cornerback room have so many questions going into the season, it's kind of scary because it is a position group that flashes in terms of, well, how bad is it going to be? Or will they be able to defend the pass? Or will they hold up in pass coverage? That's a scary situation to be in because we've seen SMU in the past, pretty much pre-Scott Symons and Ricky Hundley, be a team that programs could just throw it around on them. And now it's just a different situation coming off of last year, and they're going to need to improve on their coverage overall. And now with Teddy Knox's legal issues, you lost a guy who's really starting to push up the depth chart, at least until things are resolved and if he's back with the team. And that's something that's going to have to be worked out because they brought in Deuce Harmon from Texas A&M, and he's got talent. He's got starting experience in the SEC, but you want to see more out of him. You want to see him be Charles Woods, Chris Megginson level of player at the cornerback spot. So Scott Symons and Ricky Hundley can feel good about calling X or calling Y and knowing that, hey, Deuce is going to have it. Deuce is going to cover it well, and we're going to be okay. And then whoever they throw out there at the other cornerback spot, whether it be a transfer or whether it be some of these younger players that are trying to push their way up the depth chart, they're going to be okay because Deuce has one side locked down. That's where they need to continue to get more out of Deuce Harmon so that he can be this reliable, high-level corner. And we saw flashes of that in the spring, but we need to see more, quite frankly. And so we'll be tracking the cornerback room very closely in the transfer portal. It's a position group that could very well end up being okay if they find somebody really talented in the portal, or it could be one that you sit back and you say, okay, all right, I wonder what they're going to do with that group, and they're going to have to rotate a lot, and somebody's going to have to step up, and they're just going to have to hope and pray as their strategy that somebody makes it happen and is able to produce at a high level. When you look at the options for this team, that as far as who could produce and who could step up, Jahari Rogers is a veteran who's been around a long time. We know that name. We know he's got the potential, but he's going into his last year. He's going to be probably a depth rotational type of player for you at the cornerback position. What SMU needs is two players in particular to really step up and stake their claim to playing time and contributing. And that's Jalen Davis Robinson. They call him Smoke, and AJ Davis. Last year around this time, everyone was hoping and thinking that AJ Davis could be the third corner. That's how highly thought of he was behind Charles Woods and Chris Megginson. That's the type of spring he had. now we're here once again where talking with Ricky Hundley's pretty confident in what AJ Davis has done and what he's been able to put together. If that's the case, and he has put together a strong offseason, a strong summer, and another strong fall camp to back up what he did this spring, then you can start to say, okay, we feel good about him. And again, this is all kind of assuming they get a transfer at this position as well. But if you bring in if you have an AJ Davis who is stepping up and making a move up the depth chart and really showing that he could be a guy that they can really rely on, now you're looking at a little bit of a different cornerback room. And they've been hoping AJ Davis can do this for a while now. It's just a matter of him putting it all together. And the same goes for Jalen Davis Robinson, but he's kind of in a little bit of a different boat. I mean, this is AJ Davis's third year on campus. Now you've got Jalen Davis Robinson on campus for a second year. So he's somebody that has been kind of nicked up. He was nicked up a little bit in spring with a hamstring. He missed some time, but he returned and had a good finish to spring, which was nice to see. That showed, okay, maybe this hamstring wasn't as bad as it initially looked. I was there when he got hurt, and it was, okay, all right, maybe he's back at the end of spring. He was able to return and make it happen. With Jalen Davis Robinson, he's got the speed. I mean, that recoverability that he has is really something special. That's what Teddy Knox has out there on the field, that ability to recover when things go wrong. What Jalen Davis Robinson has is a little bit more polish, a little bit more reliability, I think, built into his game. It's about Ricky Hundley getting that jump up to the next level that we all know or think Smoke can play at consistently. It's about Ricky Hundley getting that out of Smoke or AJ Davis and them putting that together. Because if one of them, or if SMU's lucky, both of them can do that, your cornerback room is going to be okay. But right now, it's the biggest question mark on the defense. And it's a question mark from the standpoint of, okay, can Deuce be incredibly high-level cornerback? Can Jalen Davis Robinson or AJ Davis, one of those guys, step up and be the cornerback that you need them to be? And then who do they bring in the transfer portal? All of these things are very important questions that need to be answered over the course of fall camp and into next season. They bring in Alex Rogers. They bring in Speedy Nettles over the summer. And Alex Rogers is somebody that's probably going to redshirt. Speedy Nettles is probably somebody who physically can contribute early on. He can play. He can be somebody that this team can maybe find some snaps with. And I think physically he's good enough to be able to play early on and maybe not have to redshirt, probably play a lot on special teams. So we'll track that as fall camp approaches. But they do have some depth. They just need somebody to step up at corner. Where the depth took a little bit of a hit, but it's okay, is the safety room. And SMU has a really strong group of safeties returning. And at the nickel spot, you've got Brandon Crosley, you've got CJ Sanders. Crosley played a little bit of free safety this spring while Brian Massey was out recovering with an injury. Now Brian Massey is going to play elsewhere in all likelihood as he entered the transfer portal. He's got some offers to go finish out his college career elsewhere and kind of help somebody else out a little bit. He had been relegated to a backup role with the emergence of Jonathan McGill and Ahmad Moses and Isaiah Wacobia, Kyron Chambers, who could still play corner or safety, I guess. But Abdul Muhammad emerged at nickel a little bit this spring, had a nice spring to kind of, cement himself, maybe a little bit of snaps here and there at the nickel spot. But overall, the health of this safety group is very strong. I mean, sometimes when the position group is so good, sometimes it's easy to just spend a little bit of time on it. And that is the safety group being as good as it is with guys like Jonathan McGill and Ahmad Moses, Isaiah Wacobia back. And I think this spring really showed that they are in a really special situation that so many teams would want to be in. I think Ahmad Moses, in terms of developing, had about as good of a spring as you could have asked for. Physically, he really looks the part and he looks special. And I think SMU is going to have a special safety in him. He's got two more years of eligibility. When you look at him and Isaiah Wacobia, they could really be true stars. I know Isaiah Wacobia emerged as one last year for SMU and leading them, in the AAC championship game to be that defensive MVP. But when you look at Ahmad Moses and his skill set coupled with Isaiah Wacobia, they've got a chance to have a really, really fun group of safeties to also be there with Jonathan McGill, who we know what he brings to the table. So, I mean, Scott Symons is pretty lucky in that regard, having this group of safeties. Jonathan McGill had another strong spring. He was really, really good. Abdul Muhammad was probably the mover of the group this spring, really was able to step up and made some plays in the spring game and all of those things. But this is a safety group that when you look at the transfer portal, they're going to probably try to add a young safety, somebody who can come in and help right away and do all of those things. A young safety who can sit back and learn for a year and not be worried about learning for a year. That's kind of the goal with Brian Massey now on the move. So kind of balance this room out a little bit. They have a strong group of 2025 prospects committed, but they'll be super young in all likelihood at some point. And so you'd like to have one safety who you could kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit. So I would expect them to try to bring in somebody who's spent 1 year in college elsewhere, is looking for a fresh start. But other than that, the safety group is in a really good spot. I mean, you have so much talent returning with Brandon Crosby, CJ Sanders at the nickel, and then Jonathan McGill, Ahmad Moses, Isaiah Wacobia coming back. It's going to be a really solid group of safeties for SMU next season as they enter ACC play. So with that, guys, we kind of ran down the defense and kind of what to know from the spring. It's still a crazy idea that SMU is a very, very strong defense. And if they are going to be another strong defense nationally, it'll be another raise and a round of cheers in that regard for the defensive staff. But also it'll give SMU a really good chance to find success in the ACC in year one. If SMU is going to do it, quite honestly, the defense is going to be the reason why. So hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of the defense and where it stands after spring ball. We'll obviously talk a lot more about each position group as the transfer portal wraps up and spring ball gets further in the rearview mirror. But first, before we go, I got to remind you guys, statusjet.com. Reach out to them and talk to them about how you can elevate your experience, whether it be for a game day, a business trip, family and friends trip. How they can elevate your trip is really what they're worried about. They can take you from point A to point B with that level of luxury, with a journey to wherever you want to go that should exceed your expectations. And they have unparalleled elegance to offer in the private jet charter space. That's what David Henry and his team can bring you. So again, use the code PonyUpACC, talk with them about what they can do for you with that discount on a round trip flight, and see what your options are and how you can take your next trip in style. So reach out to our friends at Status Jet and learn more today about what they can do for you. Quick note before we depart, SMU tight end Lonnie Johnson just entered the transfer portal. He redshirted this past year, so he is moving on. He was a guy that a smaller tight end when he was brought in, looked more like a wide receiver, but did bulk up a bit. But kind of makes sense that he's going to move on as his path to playing time just got a little bit harder. So with that, guys, just want to pass along that quick note, and we will catch you on Friday with the recruiting podcast. We're now 4 for 4 on the week. We're going to talk a little recruiting on Friday. So hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. We'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.